What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us here in these very weird times. If you are watching this, you probably know the man on the screen already, but for those of you that don't, that is Rufus Peabody. He is a pro bettor. He is also the host of the Bet the Process podcast. Rufus, I know things are incredibly strange right now, especially for you, so I thank you for taking the time today, man.
Well, I don't have much else to do, Matt. It's I'm an unemployed bettor at the moment.
Yeah, well, we'll get there in just a second, but let's start things off with, obviously this is just incredibly timely with everything, but you said you started to feel a little bit sick, and then turns out that you actually tested positive for the coronavirus, correct?
I did. So I was traveling. I was in California for this sort of professional gambler ski trip thing, and then had a wedding in Telluride, and then met some friends and went skiing in Vail. And so I was doing a lot of travel. I got back to Boston, I guess it was like March 4th for the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, which is here in Boston. Mm-hmm. And I guess, I was tired because I'd been, I was tired from all the travel.
Right.
So I felt a little fatigued on Friday, and then Saturday, Friday I went out. With a bunch of people, we were out till, the bars closed. And so I woke up Saturday with a headache, and I didn't really think much of it because I was like, I'm just a little hungover. And then, right. And then I guess Sunday it didn't go, it didn't go away. And I sort of had a low grade fever, I think, on Sunday, and a little bit of a cough. But that was basically it. I was feeling better by Tuesday. But I did notice that, when I had a glass of wine, I was like, this tastes like this Pinot is turned or something. And my fiance was like, I don't know, it tastes good. It tastes really good to me, because we'd been on a trip to wine country and ordered a case of this really nice wine, and it tasted like it was just like, there's something wrong with this. But and that's when I realized my taste was just off. And I remember, I made a spicy dinner, and I didn't taste any spice. So, that wasn't the first symptoms for me or anything like that, but that's something I noticed sort of afterwards.
And what
I guess
made
when I said that,
yeah, I was going to say, what made you go, okay, so maybe this might actually be the coronavirus here? So,
I didn't really think it was at all. But my fiance got sick that week. I guess 2 weeks ago. And so, and she works in the medical field, so she got tested. And when she came back positive, I realized that I must have had it and probably given it to her, because she felt, right. So I feel kind of bad about that.
So as far as things go now, you just basically tired, kind of felt like crap, but you didn't get one of the severe cases, I assume. No,
mine was really mild. I wouldn't have, I didn't really think much of it at all. Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky.
All right. So you said, you said at the top here, so in an era of no sports, one of the weirdest things that is going on in my lifetime right now, I don't know if I've ever gone this long without watching some sort of sporting event in my life. What does a professional sports bettor do when there is no sports?
Let's see. We're on our third jigsaw puzzle. We went from 750 pieces to 1,000. Now we're on a 2,000 piece Las Vegas panorama one. And I think we probably have only 200 or 300 pieces left. So there's that. I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I'd never, ever seen in my life. So that was a lot of hours.
Right.
I've also been doing some R&D work. I've been talking with friends. I've been doing a lot of sort of thinking, ideating, I guess, about, given what's going on now, what sort of opportunities there could be, and sort of how do I want to position myself in the future, as well as sort of working on some stuff for some business ventures. So I will say I have not been nearly as productive as I'd like to have been. It's kind of hard just because there's so much going on with the news, and it feels like you can't really get away from it.
No, I'm with you. Every day I wake up and I feel like I've got this list of 10 things that I'm going to get done, and I'm all gung ho to get going. And then you get on Twitter, and then the news starts going, and you get all confused and sidetracked and everything. So you said you're doing a little R&D. I know you are big into modeling, and this is one of the things that people love to follow you for, and the things that you talk about. Is this like, are you kind of moving on to another version of what you've built, or are you kind of just going back in and doing some testing and trying to make sure that you're as optimal as you can be?
So I'm always trying to improve my models in the different sports. And there's some stuff that I'd been working on in golf over the off season. And by off season, I mean like December, because there's not a huge off season in golf. But I sort of, I guess, for the beginning of the, this calendar year for the PGA Tour and European Tour for that matter, I was kind of, I was in between models in a way. I'd sort of made some tweaks and to try to change my sort of pipeline and sort of my process to make things more efficient, but I wasn't really fully there yet. So it made it kind of a chore every week to have to run it, because it was sort of in an in-between place. So I'm trying to get it to that fully, to the place where, I want it to be for when golf comes back. But it's a lot harder to motivate when you don't know how long you're going to be without sports to bet on. It just feels, I don't know. It's been very tough to stay motivated, but I'm sure a lot of people, smart people out there are probably taking this time and like learning to code in some language they can't, or taking online courses or something. And I should be doing that. I should be I have no excuse not to. I should be giving myself some structure and be sort of tackling some of these things that I've wanted to, that I haven't had time to.
So I heard you talk about that you weren't positive whether you were going to tackle the baseball season this year or not. Now that opening day has been pushed back indefinitely, we don't even know when baseball is going to start again, and you haven't had anything to bet on. There wasn't golf for you there. Have you rethought the baseball thing? Are you going to give baseball a go after all, or are you still sitting back and saying, it's not really worth it for me?
No, I'm going to sit back. I think I made, in retrospect, I made the right decision not putting in time working on baseball this off season. I've always struggled in around the All-Star break and after July and August betting baseball. And so, if the season's beginning at that point, I think it could be a little bit, it's going to be a little unusual. I think that, and obviously these long layoffs are going to add uncertainty. So there probably are going to be some opportunities there. But it should be interesting to see, because normally early in the season, April, pitchers have the advantage largely. Part of that is due to the weather at that point. And if the season begins in the middle of the summer,
right.
it could be maybe flip-flops.
So let's go to how you got into this in the first place, and then we'll go into one of the things that I really want to talk to you about is just, how vocal you are on Twitter about just trying to improve the industry overall. But how did you get into this in the first place? Were you a poker guy? I know a lot of people have a poker background, and that's how they get into some sort of other gambling venture. Did you ever do the poker thing, or were you just a sports bettor from the get-go?
No, I was never a poker player. At least never a good poker player. I played with friends and stuff like that. But
right.
I was always into the numbers side of sports, and I just kind of lucked my way into this. I read an article on ESPN back in 2007 about this company, Las Vegas Sports Consultants, which at the time they set odds for 90% of Nevada sports books, or consulted on the opening odds. And so I talked my way into an internship there. I convinced Yale actually to pay for me to go out there, because I was going to be doing research for my senior thesis, which at the time I thought it was going to be on sort of corruption in the amateur athletics, basically looking at point shaving and stuff like that. And I kind of did an about face and ended up doing my senior thesis on psychological inefficiencies in the baseball betting market, which sort of became the skeleton for or the backbone for my first baseball model that I bet on when I moved to Vegas. So I moved to Vegas after college, worked for Las Vegas Sports Consultants for a year, and figured out I could do better betting than I could on the odds making side of the counter. So I guess I moved to Vegas in 2008. So it's been 12 years since then. I feel like the first few years went by slowly, and just, I don't know, the last decade is just flown by.
Now, all along that, did you start out, okay, I'm going to bet every single sport, and then you figured out along the way what you were best at? How did you hone in on kind of what you consider to be your bread and butter?
No, so it's more the opposite. I sort of started, I had baseball, and I was betting baseball on props essentially, and that was sort of it at the beginning. And then once I sort of had those in place, then I was able to sort of look at other sports. In 2010, my former senior thesis advisor, Cade Massey, approached me about building an NFL rating system for the Wall Street Journal. He'd been approached by this writer, Michael Salfino, about that. So, and Cade, he and I had kept in close contact, and he said, if you want to do this, you want to do it with me. So it was a really great opportunity to collaborate with him on something. And that was sort of my first, that was the first football model I built to sort of attack, a big market. Well, baseball's a big market too, but like attacked NFL sides. And so, and we expanded into college football a few years later. But during that time, initially, I was also doing a lot of derivative betting. So I figured, at that point in time, I think I could price the derivatives a little bit better than a lot of these books could. Now it feels like, it's pretty simple to do in a way. It's not totally straightforward,
right.
But there aren't the same opportunities there used to be there. But I got into golf, I think in 2010, when I found some data and was just like, hey, I wonder how efficient this market is, and found it was pretty inefficient. And so that's kind of how I went about, it kind of was just happenstance, not happenchance. That I guess, that got me into particular sports at particular times. But yeah, I don't bet hockey or basketball. So I keep it, I think it's easier. I feel like I'm spread really thin as it is, just with, I guess, 2.5 sports now. Right. Because I guess I'm not betting baseball anymore, but I think it's a lot harder if you're trying to do everything. It's a lot harder to do it well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you just said that, because that was going to be my follow-up here. I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this who aspire to be like you, who want to be a professional sports bettor, or at least be someone who's profitable betting. Maybe they can't quit their day job, but at least be someone who's profitable in the venture. Is that kind of a piece of advice that you would give to them, is, hey, really kind of hone in on one or two and quit trying to, bet Australian rules football or whatever it might be, or something like that?
100%. I think, especially if you're starting small, starting with the smaller market sport where the markets can be less efficient, and just specializing in that, it's, if you get familiar with that data, and you're thinking along that, if your brain is just thinking in the wavelength of that sport, I think it's a lot easier to do well, betting a sport if it's the only thing you're focusing on.
So, what about DFS? What you do is, you're obviously known for being very, very good at betting props. If you look at DFS, I understand it's not apples to apples, but what you're trying to do is project a player's performance and then put a bunch of those guys that you think are going to perform well onto a same team. Did you ever give DFS a shot? Do you think that DFS was something that maybe if you in another life would have been something that you would have been really into, and maybe kind of went in that route?
If I could turn back time in like 2012 or 2013, I would have gone entirely DFS, because from what I've heard, it was extremely inefficient at that point. And I do some DFS stuff now, but I've done well with that, but from what it's ludicrous to think that the market could be that much more that inefficient as people have said. But because it seems like there are some inefficiencies, especially in the sort of larger tournaments, the GPPs. But I think DFS sort of, you have the projections, but you sort of have another component too, and that's sort of figuring out ownership and correlations. And I think it's a fun challenge, and it's different, and I enjoy it actually.
Yeah, I bet in way more sports these days than I do play DFS, but kind of like you mentioned, I think it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to go at it, to where you are, you have some skin in basically every one of the games that are going on, right? I kind of look at it more of I'm going to bet, maybe one or two games that I feel like I have an edge on in a week. But DFS gives me a chance to kind of scatter some exposure out, enjoy everything that's going on all the TVs that I've got going around. And so I kind of look at it more as from that standpoint these days than I do from hey, let's sit down and grind and try to grind out a profit here.
Right.
So let's go back to the sports betting industry. And like I said, you're one of my favorite follows on Twitter, because one of the things that you definitely do is you're outspoken and certainly give your opinion on things that you think need to change, or, I think that you've actually probably even caused some change somewhere along the way with some of your opinions on things that are going on. So I want to start here in Vegas. I live in Vegas, and you've spent a lot of time here as well. When you look at what Vegas and the offerings here compared to these newly minted markets out in, let's say, Jersey and Pennsylvania and stuff, and I know you've spent some time in Pennsylvania and messed around with, in Jersey and spent some time with those apps and different things out there as well. Where do you think Vegas is missing the boat here? At any given time, you can open up DraftKings or FanDuel or PointsBet or any of these other apps, and there's, 200 different ways to bet every single game, where we know that that's just, not the case here in Vegas. And while we haven't seen the numbers really, fall off quite yet, you see Jersey, you see Pennsylvania, you see these other states coming into the market, you see their numbers surging, you see their handle really climbing. Do you think Vegas is maybe missing the boat a little bit, being a little too old school?
I think they're different. I think you're right. You do see a ton of different offerings for DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, all these books in New Jersey, but most of these offerings are basically only geared towards recreational bettors, and they're not gonna. The limits are so low, and if you're trying to actually exploit edges, you're going to get limited really quickly. So effectively, you don't have all those options if you're actually if you're an advantage player. I do think. Personally, I still think. I still like the way Nevada books handle things better, just in terms of their philosophy on bookmaking. I think, a lot of people, the people like, Jimmy Vaccaro, Chris Andrews at South Point, even like, Art Manteris at Stations. These guys have been in this industry for a long time, and I think they have a lot of respect for what they're doing. And that doesn't mean they're going to go and give me ridiculous limits, unfortunately, but,
right.
But I think that they view bookmaking a certain way, and which is very different than sort of these European operators that have come into New Jersey. And so I still think Nevada is, in terms of the art of bookmaking, sort of, the best place. And then you look at sort of newcomers in the game, Circa, and I think Circa is the gold standard. Like they don't have a ton of different offerings yet, but the way that they're booking, they're taking high limits, or decent limits, at least high limits for bigger events. And they're taking the same action from everybody. And I think that's, personally, I think it's fair. It's, it's fair. It's transparent, and I like that. I don't think it's geared. It's going to be interesting to see how they do, because they are going to get a lot more sharp action as a percentage of their total handle than most other books. And so and especially given that especially for futures and stuff, their their theoretical hold is the best in the industry by far. How if they're going to be able to turn much of a profit doing that. So I hope they do. I hope, because I hope that kind of approach to bookmaking continues and to prosper.
These East Coast books have caught a lot of flack on Twitter. I know there's a lot of people who, the way that they've gone about some of the things, the way that they handle some of the limits and whatnot. Do you fundamentally have a problem with the way that they are going about bookmaking? Because would it be a little bit better if they just came out and said to you, hey, you know what, Rufus, we're not in this for you. We're in it for the masses. We're in it for the recreational players. So that's kind of why we're going about the business that we're going about right now.
Yeah. I would appreciate the honesty. What I don't like is when someone like Joe Asher, the CEO of William Hill, says they're not banning people for winning. They're not limiting bettors for being winning bettors. And that's, an outright falsehood. When that kind of just, I feel like, insults our collective intelligence as bettors. But I do think, there's one argument that says these are private businesses. They have a right to basically take bets from who they want and refuse action, or in the case of many states, just limit action from whoever they want to. But I think also this is not a free market. I mean, there are not an unlimited number of licenses out there. Not, I can't open a book if I want to.
Right.
Well, without a lot of money and a lot of red tape and all that.
Yeah.
So if the government is essentially saying, okay, we're only going to allow these companies to have licenses, I think in a way, I think that changes things a little bit, in my opinion, where I think they should have a responsibility to actually be providing a service to everybody.
Yeah, I guess that's been one of my. I guess that's one of where I've had a hard time trying to toe the line here, because I try to look at it from the other side as well, where I say, okay, look, they don't really care about people like me who are high volume bettors, or people like you who are really, really good at it. They care more about the person that's coming in and throwing down just the $20 bets here and there recreationally and all that. But then at the same time, I do understand where you're coming from as well, where it's like, hey, look, it's still, we need to level the playing field. We need to make sure that things are going on. It's kind of one of the weird internal struggles actually that I've had through all this, whenever they list some of the games at -112 instead of -110. And there was a lot of people who said, I can't believe they're listing this at -112. And, I did step back a little bit and say, but you know what? The guy who's betting $20, the difference in -112 and -110, he just doesn't give a damn, and so it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know where I fall ethically on this.
I mean, I think the issue though is, to me, at least from sort of, I guess an economic perspective, it's not, the system we have right now is not efficient. I mean, I feel like for any game, there are people that want to wager big on both sides of that game and are unable to at these particular books because they're limited. Right. And so I think to me, it's an argument for an exchange model or something on the peer-to-peer side, because, you have this money that wants to be bet, that, is not really able to be bet, at least not in the United States at this point.
So if you are now no longer Rufus Peabody the Bettor, and you are now Rufus Peabody, the czar of all things sports books, and you were able to come in and make a couple of changes, what would be the first couple of things you would do to help? Because, I mean, look, this is Colorado's about to go live. Illinois is about to go live. We know all these states that are coming on here. So what would be something that you would tell these states? What would be something you would do to try to help, make this U.S. market as robust as it could be?
I would try to essentially come up with projections for these states to basically say, hey, if you offer like 30 licenses at a 5% tax rate, this is what your revenue is going to look like. Versus if you offer one license and take 50% tax rate, this is what your revenue is going to be. And I think right now, I think the states think that, or some of the states like New Hampshire think that the latter scenario is actually going to be better for them. Because that's what lobbyists are telling them, the lobbyists for that one operator, for example. Whereas, and I think that right now, I mean, everybody, I guess in sort of the legislative process, these different actors are all lobbying for their self-interest, and you don't really have anybody lobbying for the interests of bettors and basically saying, hey, this is what's actually going to happen from this. I mean, PointsBet is interested in PointsBet. DraftKings is interested in DraftKings. The NFL is interested in the NFL's best interest, right? I mean, Canby is arguing for Canby, but nobody's arguing for what's actually best for the state. And I think in general, what is going to be best for bettors is going to be probably best for the state.
And I know that that's something that you have taken up now, is trying to do what you feel is best for the bettors out there. How has that grown from idea into practice here, and where do you guys stand right now?
Well, we're still just trying to get this up and running, working on the paperwork and all that. I mean, it's and you're referring to the startup, the American Bettors Coalition with myself and Captain Jack. I think that it's something that's important. It's taking more time than I would like, but I mean, we're trying to put together a board. We're trying to figure out, and we have a lot of people that have signed up and said that they are interested in volunteering their time. So we're basically just trying to, put this all together. And, I don't have have experience starting a nonprofit or anything like that. So I'm talking to a lot of different people, and basically trying to just be a sponge and absorb as much knowledge as I can, to figure out sort of how we're going to go about this. And I think I guess the cancellation of all these sporting events has given us a little bit more time, but it's also made it tougher to try to identify a good launch date, because there's nothing going on
right.
in the sports betting world right now. So, but hopefully we're going to use this time to sort of really get this up and running. Yeah.
So people would kill me if I had some time with you and I didn't bring up the DraftKings Championships and how everything went down over there. That was where I met you. I was over there with Gail Alexander, and we did not fare as well as you. Obviously, we went busto in that thing, but everyone knows the story by now. If you don't, all you have to do is Google Rufus Peabody DraftKings Championships. So to save you from that, but we are, way later in all of this. Where does that situation sit? Are you able to talk about it at all anymore? And is it resolved in any sort of way, shape, or form?
It never really resolved. I mean, I went back and forth. My lawyers went back and forth with the DraftKings lawyers and DraftKings over the months after. We filed a complaint with the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement, and they did a investigation, which they came back and basically said, "Hey, DraftKings said it was okay." Like it wasn't much of an investigation, in my opinion. They didn't actually investigate the claims that DraftKings made, which was a little bit disheartening and upsetting to me. But I mean, if you look at it, a regulatory body like that, in general, they're paid by indirectly by the operators that they're supposed to be regulating. So it's very difficult. And this isn't just in sports betting. It's very difficult in general to have an objective regulatory agency, just because of the incentive structure. So I guess I wasn't entirely surprised, but I wish they would have done a little bit more due diligence there. But I did not file a lawsuit against DraftKings, and I'm not saying that it's impossible that I won't, but at this point, the whole thing, it just dragged on for so long. And at one point, I actually asked if they would, rather than giving me a settlement, if they would actually just instead make a donation to this nonprofit, which this was sort of the idea behind the American Bettors Coalition. Like this is back last April or May. And they actually told me that they thought such a nonprofit would be counterproductive, and that the regulatory, the regulations in place are more than enough to protect bettors, and an organization like mine could confuse them because they wouldn't know who to go to. So I wasn't really happy with that, because a nonprofit needs money to succeed.
Right. So, but yeah. So I guess a question for you. I know this is going to be probably pretty hard to separate because when we're talking about the amount of money involved and all that, but if it is at all possible, the thought of a betting championship like this and trying to take an alternative approach to the sports betting space and trying to be a little bit innovative. Again, let's try and wipe out the ending to all this.
I think it was a great idea.
Okay, yeah.
I think DraftKings had a fantastic idea to hold that. But I do think there are challenges, and I know that obviously this year's was it canceled or just postponed, or I don't even know.
I think it was canceled. I think they were going to do one for just basketball only. Yeah. And I think that one got canceled, but I think there's two still on the books for the fall. But again, as we sit right now, we don't have any idea how that's going to play out.
I think the biggest issue with this, I think it's a great idea, but you do have the issue of collusion, especially if there's a big overlay. I found out after the fact that there were groups out there that, had a lot of different, they sent a bunch of different people there it's, let's say you have 5 entries and you can, have 4 people bet big underdogs, separate underdogs or something. And then the 5th person do a money line or the favorite money lines for all those, and you're guaranteed to have someone have a nice hit there. Right. I mean, it's so
Right.
I think there are huge opportunities for colluding. And I think it's really, really difficult to necessarily to identify that, especially in a small sample. I think, I talked with John Aguiar about this a little bit because I had been approached by people before this spring sports betting national championship asking if I wanted to join their group. And so I felt like I was in a really bad position where I didn't think if I entered on my own, I'd be able to really compete because
right.
I think the deck is stacked against me there. But at the same time, I didn't think it was an ethical thing to do to sort of collude. So, I was going to not enter for that reason. So I think that, and John said that they had, they were aware that people were doing, going to try to do this and they were going to look into this, but I think it's really hard to police. And I don't know how they would be able to sort of effectively police that. And I don't have the answer there, but I think it's something they do need to address because, I mean, we saw the whole controversy with collusion in the DFS space, where in reality, what happened was this, I guess, couple, if they did collude, they had 300 lineups instead of 150. But, overall, your first lineup is going to be the one that has the highest expected value. Your second's going to have the second highest. It's going to go down. So, I mean, if, those lineups 151 to 300 have a lot less value than the first 150. So I don't think, obviously these people are circumventing the entry limits, but there isn't the same benefit that collusion has in something like the sports betting national championship. So.
Yeah, you have the same. I basically said the exact same thing to people. I mean, listen, if you want to be upset about something, be upset that they broke the rules, because obviously we don't want people breaking the rules. But if you think because you put 300 lineups in a contest with 150,000 entries or whatever, that's the golden ticket, I can assure you that is not the golden ticket. It's not going to happen.
And I guess professionals want to bet more because, if they have, if they're positive expected value for the first 150, maybe their next 150, they're probably expecting is also going to be positive expected value. So it's essentially allowing a higher percentage of the pool to be sharp money if you didn't have these limits.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just interesting. There's a lot of people who I could tell were like, oh, well, if I could just throw in 300 lineups, I'd be a millionaire too. It's just like, no, that's not how it works. You brought up ethics, which is perfect because it takes us into one of the last things I want to talk to you about here. And that is the tout industry, which is something that, again, that you are very vocal about and something that I could not be more aligned with you here on. And that is, if you are unfamiliar, if you're watching this and you're not into the lingo, it's basically people who will sell you sports betting picks for various prices. Sometimes people charge you $5. Sometimes people charge you $500, depending on who the person might be somewhere along the way, or they might charge you $3,000, let's say, for a season, whatever, however that might go. You are very anti kind of the tout business here. You've time and time again, you've said, listen, it's impossible to make money if you're paying the person this amount of money. At the end of the day, you're just not going to make money doing this or whatever. But can before we get into some of these people doing this, especially exploiting people to the maximum here, can you just give your overall blanket statement on why this whole thing is bad? Okay,
so I think where to begin? So first off, most people selling picks are not winning bettors because in general, if you're a winning bettor, you're going to be able to do better betting on your own than you will be selling picks. I would say that less than 1% of touts out there are actually selling winning picks. The thing is, if you could claim, hey, I can find the 1%. I found the 1% that's selling winning picks. The problem is that this isn't the stock market. This is a sports betting market. It's not as large. You're not buying Amazon stock. You're buying a future on a team to win a game. And so if let's say a tout sends out, a pick at a price of -110, if this tout is actually sending out winning picks, you're not probably the only person that knows this. There's professional bettors out there in some cases, and just that also are getting this information and subscribing, and probably have written bots to automatically bet immediately when you release the pick. And so that line isn't going to stay at minus 110. That line is going to move to minus 115 or minus 120. And most likely any value that you would have had would be gone. So if you're not that person that has the fastest spot, you're not going to be making money off of that. And I know this sounds like a great story, but I talked to somebody years ago, back in like 2015, who said that they were automatically betting the Massey Peabody NFL picks we were releasing for free. They had a scrape, when they were released, they had a bot that was automatically firing them every time, and he'd made some nice money off of that. And so he probably lost some of it back in 2016 to 2018. But that thing, I mean, it does happen. It's not, and so this is the sort of the 1% of pick sellers that are actually good. But the other thing is you have Twitter has made it easier and easier. Twitter and Instagram for touts, because they can tweet out a bunch of picks and delete the ones that lost. There's really no real there's no sort of third party. Well, there are a few third party monitors out there, but some of them, I don't know the specifics. I don't want to say that they're ethical or not ethical, or if it's pay to play or what. But there's not, I guess, a well-known third party site out there tracking people. So it's buyer beware.
What percentage of these guys would you say, and I mean, you're well more in the know than 99.9% of the people out there. What percentage of these people would you say actually make money? Because I mean, as well as I do, the percentage of people who just make money just in general sports betting is very incredibly small. So what do you think is the percentage of these people who are actually out there selling picks that are actually making money?
So what percentage of pick sellers have picks that are making money, or which?
Yeah, like of those people, like how many of those people that are out there selling picks do you think are actually profitable sports bettors?
So the question is profitable sports bettors or actually show a profit, because I think there's people that get lucky. Right. So I think it depends on what sample you're looking at, but long term, I'd say it's 1% or so probably.
And that brings us to everyone's favorite in Vegas, Dave, right? I mean, the guy that's going on out here and, the $500 whale plays and talking about, I saw the other one. What was it the other day? He did a cricket one or something like that or whatever. It was something absurd where it was $500 for cricket.
And he was studying up for the hula hoop competition. My fiance literally thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard, like the curling and the badminton. He was like, I spent all day studying curling.
I spent all days. Yeah, that's what it was.
Or cricket or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember. So I kind of have a little bit of a harsh opinion on this, I think also, and it's a little bit of this Darwinism kind of thing going on. But if someone is willing to send this guy $500 for his curling pick of the play or his day of their ping pong play of the day or whatever it might be, at some point, are you kind of like, you know what, man, that's on you. You're kind of dumb. You're kind of dumb. Like it's hard for me to feel sorry for that person. I don't know. I think Vegas Dave is obviously just the worst of the absolute worst out there. But at some point I start to look at these other people and go, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah. The thing is though, I mean, there's scammers in all industries. And if we just said, okay, anybody that falls for one of these scams is dumb. I mean, I think that I think, well, I don't know. I mean, I get your point. Like, I think that at some point there needs to be responsibility, but I think also we understand the industry well. I mean, we've been in this industry for a while. We know the harsh, the truths about it, but someone that maybe doesn't even know anything about the sports betting world, maybe doesn't know sports very well, thinks it's possible to pick it at 75 or 80% clip, and maybe they buy it thinking like, oh, well, this guy, he wouldn't be able to claim this if it wasn't true. I mean, and so I think those are the people you want to protect. And so, I mean, and just like, people that, I mean, obviously if somebody falls for the sort of Nigerian prince scam, that it's not good. It's not good, but that still is not legal. That still should not be, the scammer
it doesn't make it right.
It doesn't make it right for the scammer to do that. That's my point.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. And certainly I try to hold them accountable at any opportunity as well. It's just, I mean, they're still in business. And so I look at it and I'm like, wow, there must be a lot more people out there that fall for this type of stuff than I'm given credit for. Cause I guess I just, like you said, we've been around it so long and we're so familiar with things. You just look at it from the outside and you say, who would ever do this? But, I mean, he's still, flashing his money in his houses in Mexico and his cars and whatever. So I don't know. Some people are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that. That's going on.
I mean, he's selling a lifestyle. He's basically saying, look, you know how you know that I'm legit because of this lifestyle I'm living. Mm-hmm.
And I guess if that's important that's important to a lot of people, I guess. And so that's easy to fall for, right? Like you become so enamored with
how is he not a winning bettor if he has this, these cars and he has the house in Cabo and he's, sitting courtside at a Lakers game with this beautiful, with some, Instagram model or whatever it is. I mean, it's smoke and mirrors.
It's con man. It's con man stuff. Yeah.
Right. Con men are very good marketers. They're very good at, persuading people of something, and I think Vegas Dave's obviously very good at that. He's just not a very good sports bettor.
And I want to end things here with promoting your podcast. I mean, the Bet the Process podcast, you guys always talk about, you and Jeff, your co-host, talk about, listen, we're doing this because we want to educate the masses here. And so I do want just to give you a little bit of a platform, because I think anyone who's not listening to it certainly should, because you guys take a different approach to everything. The whole podcast isn't you sitting there just breaking down games and giving out picks and things like that. It's, you're talking about the different theories behind the way that you're doing things and how you ended up a certain place and things like that. So basically where did the podcast come from and what is it morphed into now? And do you have plans for where it's going to be, whatever a year from now?
Well, I know how Jeff would have answered that. Jeff, I think on the podcast, Jeff was like, wait, didn't it start because, it allowed me to talk to him. It allowed me to talk to him without having to pay him to do so. But no, it actually originally, the idea came out of, I was talking back, this is like 2017. I had the idea for some sort of like tout watchdog thing. And Jeff was like, well, you could have a podcast of it. And we ended up having a podcast and not a site. It's a lot easier to start a podcast than a tout monitor industry watchdog website. And so it's grown. I guess it's been almost 3 years now. We are actually, we've been independent for quite a while. I think we're actually, we're in the process of potentially signing on with a podcast network. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more distribution, and from that, we'll see. It's a weekly podcast. During the football season, we talk about we do talk about some games, but mostly we're talking about sports betting analytics and sort of the process behind things. And in the football off season, we have a lot of guests on, a lot of people smarter than us that are able to sort of enlighten us on their processes about things. And I think we're planning on actually dabbling, going a little bit beyond just sports, but talking to people that have really good processes in other industries a little bit. So that's sort of the plan for it. It's been a lot of fun for both of us, I think, because Jeff and I both were at ESPN. Jeff was the first ever ESPN predictive analytics expert for 2 years. And then I followed that up for 1 year. And we both were very frustrated with the idea that, the way we were being used, I guess. I was not very good on TV at all. I'll be the first to admit. So, I was, they should have used me a little bit less, but they wanted us to basically give quick sound bites and talk in sort of narratives. And so we never really had a chance to sort of, to do things our way. And as in reality, things are not black and white. It's not like this is going to happen because of this. You can come up with a great narrative for both sides of a game. But in reality, saying, this has a 53.7% chance of happening doesn't sell. And so it's the challenging thing for us is sort of finding a way to make talking about sort of the process behind these things rather than just giving out picks, making that sort of interesting to people. So.
No, it's great. And anyone that is interested at all in the industry, I cannot recommend it enough. I mean, it is a podcast that I listen to religiously every single time that it comes out. And so I think you guys do an amazing job because, again, there's 1,000 podcasts out there of people just talking about every single game down the slate and giving you a random pick because they think XYZ, but you guys are going, taking that and digging down and going below the surface as to how you got granularly to where you got that pick or where you got that number and stuff. And I think that's invaluable to a lot of people to understand that, the gut feeling stuff is only going to get you so far.
Yeah. And I think, we do talk about some games, but mostly we're more just talking about sort of the processes behind building models, and just sort of the way of thinking that you sort of need to sort of attack the sports betting markets.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And I cannot thank you. I know you're going through some stuff over there. We're all going through a little bit of stuff, but you being able to take the time today, I cannot appreciate it enough. And everybody out there watching this and listening to this is certainly going to appreciate it as well. So Rufus, thanks for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Matt, thanks for having me on. And hopefully I'll be able to go outside soon.
You and me both, man. You and me both. Take advantage of this. I'm getting some Vegas sunshine today. So
nice.
It's good.
It's like raining and snowing here, but it doesn't, which is better because I can't, I have not set foot outside of my apartment since last Tuesday. So it's been 6 days. It's been rough, but I feel okay though.
I'll be hoping for you, man. We'll be thinking about you. Thanks.
Nice.